Today we're talking about massive transformative purpose, MTP, which is a popular acronym in the EXO community, the exponential organization community. These are folks who recognize that what used to cost tens of thousands of dollars just 10 years ago to set up the infrastructure for a company can now be achieved with little more than maybe a few $100, or let's say $500, because of cloud computing and SaaS services. So it's the idea that we can technically launch startups that folks needed VC investment to start just 10 years ago. Very, very, very different ball game. Interestingly, Peter made reference to automation, and they were talking about the jobs displacement. And one of them said, people won't lose their jobs to AI, but they'll lose their jobs to people who use AI.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of an interesting twist on it. I don't know if that's just apologizing. What they said was, nations like Korea and Germany who have very, very high use of automation, they also have very, very low unemployment. So maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something in it that you can use automation for things, but that kind of like creates extra jobs that has to look after the automation. And then you might get economies of scale or more production or better quality or something. But that picture is that people are still needed and to look after the automation, or it's adding additional stuff that gets them leverage to benefit from the amount of automation that they're driving, something like that. Pretty interesting. And it was really coming down to this idea that what you need as an entrepreneur today is not to worry about the tools until you've worried about the MTP, the massive transformative purpose. And they said, one guy asked, should I focus on large language models? And the guy said, well, that is tooling, but you'll figure that out after you've decided the MTP, the massive transformative purpose. So pretty cool. I've got an example of Cabin DAO. Cabin DAO is a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, a project of people who are trying to distribute the governance and the decision-making power of their project. And it's like, let's say it's like something like a co-living in nature, which is very similar to one of my projects, but they are like 2 years ahead of the game. They're in the US, they've got hundreds of people. They're doing good stuff. So I'm paying quite attention to them to learn what they're doing. And I really liked how they've described their principles that they go by, their guiding principles. And there's only 3 of them. And it speaks towards MTP, but I thought it was a really nice approach. They've got live in community, integrate with nature, and create together. And they break those down, and they've got some verbiage, and like one of them is touching grass is good for our well-being. So that alone is not a massive transformative purpose, but it helps to guide the values of a startup, of a club, of an organization, of a community. And then if you can find what you want to change about the world and connect those with some human-driven values that they describe as like relatively obvious and undeniable to a certain group of people, right? To a certain group of people, it's obvious that we want to live in community, integrate with nature, and create together. That is the foundation of what they're suggesting Cabin DAO as the bedrock of being able to build a community. And then if we combine that with this idea of a massive transformative purpose, and you don't need masses of expensive technology for relatively few people to make a significant start at building something, it starts to suggest, in my mind at least, how the economy is going to continue to adapt into smaller and smaller organizations and communities and projects that might reach many people, but the core of them might be very, very small. And then you've got different layers of community involvement. So you might have 5 people who are the principals of a massive, again, it's the idea of this exponential organization is that it's relatively small infrastructure and resourcing that can have a very, very large impact result. So nice ideas that I've been joying with and toying with this morning.
Mm. Well, okay, a bunch of stuff comes to mind. From the beginning there, the idea of these places with high automation having low unemployment. I think that's also a factor of production, just prosperity. And when there's prosperity, there's just additional quantities of jobs available, right? Like for example, you're only going to have so many restaurants in a neighborhood where everybody's broke, right?
Yeah.
Because they're only going to spend so much money going out to eat. There's a total budget to that neighborhood of whatever it is, $1,000 a week or something. Whereas if the neighborhood's prosperous, that budget could be $100,000 a week. Now you can have 20 restaurants, right? So I bet that's part of it. There's a lot more just money in the economy per capita. And so that creates some of these ancillary jobs and other demand for, goods and services. There's this element that you spoke of how much cheaper it is to start a company these days. And now, even at scale, I don't think that's been felt yet. That is profound. That is a much bigger deal than it sounds like on its surface to somebody. If you really think about that, I'm going back to like when I started my acupuncture practice in 2003, right? That was the beginning of where like, the internet was, out there for a while now, pretty ubiquitous. Everybody had it, every company was that stage, like needed a website. But it wasn't, I'm not sure there was LegalZoom yet, but if there was, it wasn't super well known. I remember spending like $2,500 on legal documents and incorporation, contracts for acupuncturists because I knew I'd be hiring them at some point. I kind of got this package, right? And of course, I needed an office and all this other stuff, right? There was some software for insurance billing, but I mean, by the time the software that was available then versus the 16 years later when I sold it, night and day, right? Like night and day. The software that we were using at the end was almost like automated. The person came in, you checked them in, you answered a couple questions. Is it a new diagnosis? Da, 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 da. My front desk people answered 3 of them, and it was over. Bill's going out to the insurance. At the end of the day, it was like a settlement thing. When she shut down the program, all the bills went out. Done deal. Right? They came in electronically, and the program acknowledged that, and then dealt with my accounts receivable. Right? It was crazy. Whereas I was still doing some hand bills and writing those things out in the early days, which was hellish. So now, sure, we went through this phase where then it was, $200 to use LegalZoom to incorporate an LLC in America. Wow, right? Unbelievable. So quick, 2 days, you've got a tax ID number, you're ready to go. But this is a massive leap because this is exactly like you're saying, the solopreneur, like it's not just side hustles, or some kind of small niche business. You can start a software company, and build like legit enterprise software product, from the ground up. And exactly like you're saying, what would have required so much capital for the infrastructure, for the team of developers, for the costs of all the additional tooling you might need, and so on and so forth. What might have cost you anywhere from say 150,000 to $500,000 for a proof of concept or early MVP, you could put together with a no code thing in a weekend and have at least a nice proof of concept. Using Bubble or one of these things, like that's unbelievable. I mean, we're working on these chatbots, and you're using a software that's just got you going, and you're moving things around, and you don't have to touch any code. I'm doing something that's a little more, um, we'll say code oriented, but still not really. I mean, ChatGPT is like spitting it all out for me, you know, and all I'm having to do is troubleshoot something here and there, um, and follow a few tutorials, But this stuff was, again, it was out of reach, expensive, and took a lot more time, right? All three, So what is this going to mean now? I mean, it's kind of unbelievable, right? And I think this is the potential offset to AI. Yeah, we know that there's going to be job loss and blah blah blah, but then it supposedly creates jobs, and I think that's true, but probably not overnight. But even if somewhere in the middle we can really start capturing this new opportunity and getting it kind of into people's minds that it's there, because most people still don't know this, right? Like what you just said, that this isn't common. If I went on the street and interviewed 10 people and said, "Did you know that you could basically start Google by yourself without knowing anything about software?" They would say, "Come on, like you're full of shit," right? But once this really gets out there, and I think people grok this and this stuff gets easier to use, I mean, sky's the limit, right? I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, it ties with something that has been bubbling under the surface for me for whilst I've been involved in VC and uh, incubator program for startups. Is this difference between the investability in an idea or investability in a person or a team? Um, and Slack, which we know as a B2B chat tool, didn't start off with that as its product idea. It was actually a game project
Yep.
somehow. They were going to be a game and they pivoted when they realized an opportunity that they could capture to be this B2B chat thing. And now it's one of the most well known B2B tools in the market.
Mhm.
Um, so what was more important from an investor perspective? Was it the original game idea that they wanted to get investment for? Or
Right.
was it the fact that they were competent and able to adapt and to learn and to try and experiment and make progress and discover something that works? So it's a really interesting perspective that investors, um, probably the smart ones, and I've heard it from both sides, but they want to be looking just as much, if not more, than the idea in the actual people behind in the team,
Mhm.
and the grit, the determination, the experience, whatever it is that they like about the team. That's really what they're investing in, not necessarily just the idea.
No, I think, I've thought this for a very long time. It's like, I remember about, I don't know, I wanna say, well, it was early days when I was raising money for the Werbly startup about 5 or 6 years ago that, it was this trend that VCs were looking at culture. It's like,
Mm,
"Really? This took you this long to realize that, like, a team with a great culture is probably a much better bet than one that's, terrible?" I mean, yeah, I don't know, like, it's a team for a reason, right? Like, how do sports teams fare when their locker room is toxic? Like the history is littered with these all-star teams where, the management and the ownership paid to get all the best players imaginable, but they couldn't get any chemistry together and they suck, or they can't win a championship. So, but I think what came up was interesting to me when you're talking about investing in people. I could see like a fund or as an investor, just investing in individuals at this stage and going, listen, I'm going to put my money on Gav. Like, I
mm,
think we've kind of finally reached the era where doing a token sale for yourself is valid
mm.
and just selling part of your future earnings, right? In that token sale, like Gav token. No, I think this is very legit, honestly, right? And it would be something like how I would imagine this. I thought about this years ago, but I thought, well, if you're investing in the one person, they still need other people and da 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 da, and you don't know how that's going to go. But if the idea is, hey, let's say I said, listen, guys, I've got 10 ideas that I'm going to prototype. I need $10,000 a piece for each of them. So I'm raising $100,000 to help me out. Here's why I need the extra money. Here's what I'm going to do with it. Blah, 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 blah. Get in on it. Right. Or maybe even sell it by the idea. I might raise 10,000 per, and each of them's a different little sale, with a different token associated with it. And you take your pick and you have at it. And, the token represents whatever it represents in terms of the deal. I mean, in this case, most likely equity or something along those lines. And there you go. Right. I think people will do that. And that'll be a legitimate thing to do. I think we should do it, actually, the more I think about it.
NFT, the Gav
Yeah.
NFT. I
Yeah.
like to see it flashing some kind of effect where it's got some need a bit of movement in my
Yeah.
NFT.
You'd be like from the
Something.
thinker pose to like
Something like that.
inspire.
Like a holographic, or I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about there. But I think this is why I really liked this Cabindale thing. And like their third guiding principle was create together, right?
Yeah.
And that speaks to culture. And they actually had the word culture in the description. And it's this idea of obvious truths that bond the culture, the people based on shared outlook or values. And again, I really like touching grass is good for our well-being. And they don't mean weed, obviously. They mean being out in nature and standing and putting your feet or
Right.
sitting for a picnic on a patch of grass is good for our well-being. If you can find that, then that is what builds the essence of good culture. And then you're solving for one of the top 3 reasons that startups admit why they failed in retrospect. In retrospect, is they say team alignment issues, right? Team alignment issues as one of the top 3 reasons why startups fail. So investors, for sure as heck, should be focusing on culture. And founders themselves, yes, they should be looking for the people that they're going to be able to align on enough core values and weather the storms of pivoting from being a game to being a B2B chat application. And that's good stuff. So we got the Exponential organization looking for oversized impact based on reduced amount of resourcing and people. We've got the massive transformative purpose, which is key to culture. These obvious truths that help to lock down the cultural standards and values. I guess maybe to wrap up this one, I wanted to suggest a technique. So we've talked about news, which are like Korea, Germany, and these kind of things. We looked at principles, Cabin Dow, obvious truths, culture. The technique that I'm suggesting for folks is come and speak to us about the opportunities that we can see. We now know how to make very sophisticated conversational AI tools to help with things like market research, sales, customer support, customer retention, community engagement, stuff that separate, like Dom and I have our separate career paths, and combining that intelligence together is proving very, very interesting.
Yep.
We're doing a piece of research to help inform business leaders of the challenges being experienced by their peers as AI adoption begins to accelerate. Free participation, free report, and we can build AI tools for you too. So if you're ready to really look at the options of AI, come and talk to us.